Hello, everybody. This is Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and welcome to Film Talk. I'm very excited to host Christopher Oroza Nostas, who is the filmmaker of the short Savior. I should point out that Savior won the best live action short at this past Santa Barbara Film Festival, and it's an incredible honor and joy for me to have him today. His short Savior is so powerful. This project reflects on the cyclical nature of violence and oppression and the dehumanization of the other in America as captured through political speeches from over a century. Welcome, Christopher. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. The honor is mine. I'm so glad to be here and speaking with you.
Yeah. So I mean, as I mentioned, this film reflects on the cyclical nature of violence in the United States, but it's done through dance. It's done through movement. How did this concept come about for you?
Well, for us, this was birthed from our collective anger and sorrow at everything that we've been seeing over the last, 5 or 6 years. It was, the Poway synagogue shootings, the Christchurch mosque shootings, the Pulse nightclub shooting, the violence against Black men and women who are filling our feeds due to police brutality. I mean, for me, it was really hitting home when it was Patrick Chrysius who entered in El Paso and gunned down 23 people in Texas, most of which who were Latino, and that's who he was targeting. And so we asked ourselves, first of all, how can we explore what is happening now? How can we explore the conversation that we'd like to have, which is what hope do we have for the future? How can we spark change? And where does this hatred stem from? And that is the exploration of the other. And so we as artists got together, my cinematography, Don Menon, one of my dearest friends, Laura Cristina Ortiz, an incredible costume designer, and we discussed ways to explore this concept and to distill it in a way that was not about being partisan, but it was about exploring our primal nature of wanting to enter into discourse about our greatest struggles, our oppression, our own violence, and the things that we'd experienced, and look into the past and see that, I'm really blessed for the multi-generational friendships that I do have. But the discussion we often have is, are we better now or worse now than back then? And the truth is that the problems of today were the problems of yesterday. And being able to bring that to consciousness for a lot of people who aren't exploring that historical aspect was another aspect of what we wanted to explore in this piece. So it's very dense, but it was really about exploring the idea of experiencing violence as the other in this country.
It's as you mentioned, it's very dense and it's very allegorical, but it's also so simple. The idea of watching two people through movement expressing all the ideas that you talk about. So when did that come to you that this was the way to distill? The word distill is the wrong word, to condense all of these ideas through movement.
Yeah, for me it was, there's so many different tools in the artist toolbox, right? And for us, it was trying to talk of unity requires unity across medium. So It was, movement to me was visceral. Movement was the best way to incorporate this because it's the iconography, it's seeing, hands bleeding, the gunshot, the physical, action of feeling attacked, violence against the other is a physical action. And so we wanted to personify that through the exploration of movement, but there's so much that you can say without words. And then the merger of not only the visual of the dance of that violent act or the transformation, when the characters are shocked by whether that be discourse that they're having or physically actually wounded or, and bleeding their own color and then drenching themselves in their beliefs and then engaging in this violence. All of that was, I felt like the only way it could be conveyed was through movement.
You used the word iconography, and I'm glad you did, because when I watch the film, we see the crown of thorns, or at least something that I interpret as a crown of thorn. Yes. We see internet cables, then we see veils. So whatever religion you are, the iconography speaks to you. Were you conscious of that and careful to put all the sort of universal symbols?
We wanted people to see themselves, because I think it's hard for a lot of people to put themselves in someone else's shoes. I think art has that ability to transcend that medium where you can be transported. But the hope was that everybody could see themselves as one or the other, the one that is oppressed, the one that is attacked, or simply, you know, oh, I battle for my faith, or I have been in a discussion against another's ideology. And being able to create those, and you captured it perfectly with the crown of thorns made of Ethernet cables, because it was about how do we engage in discourse about our beliefs on the internet? How do we engage in discourse face to face? And so it was very essential so that everybody could see themselves within the piece. And because you cannot alienate anyone in the discussion of how best to end division and form unity.
Uh,
So
you also mentioned beliefs, which, you know, I want to discuss that, you know, I hope that everybody's seen what we're talking about, Savior the Short. You know, the characters use paint, and I thought it was such a powerful visual, because when we argue with somebody else, we tend to hang on to our beliefs and to, what, we're so entrenched. And I love the visual of the paint, that we're covering ourselves with these beliefs. Am I close to
no,
what you?
100%. You're in my mind, but exactly, that is 100% it was the intention. You know, when we sat down with Maram, who's one of the dancers, and Anthony, we sat down and said, you know, as this transformation happens, as we cover ourselves in our beliefs, think of the ways that you yourself were oppressed and the violence that you've experienced, and allow that in this violent transformation, which is because it's the purest form of ourselves. You know, when we're attacked and we have that level of vulnerability, that is when who we are at our very core emerges. And we confront others with rage and anger, and these things birthed of that vulnerability. And so, yes, exactly what you said, that is the physical act of that painting, was capturing and transforming into your core beliefs and engaging at that moment on.
Through, as I mentioned before, and we hear speeches. We hear speeches from Robert F. Kennedy speaking about Martin Luther King's assassination. We hear Jimmy Carter's confidence speech. And then we also Richard Nixon, among others. Tell us about the choices of those speeches and the importance of listening them throughout the short.
Well, we definitely wanted to look at times in the past where we had great division and great conflict. And I was missing at the time when this was kind of birthed, hearing the rhetoric of, you know, conscious and kind and compassionate and empathetic discourse. And what it sounded like to me was being able to really grasp at hearing a voice to somebody to speak to the moment that we were living in. And I couldn't find somebody speaking of the moment now in the way that I felt really captured the struggle. And when I looked to the past, we went to those speeches and strung them together, because the truth is, you can take any of the lines from the past and play them today and say, we haven't gone anywhere. You know, the idea, poverty, ignorance, disease, those are our enemies, not our fellow man, not our neighbor, LBJ. I mean, this generation of Americans has had more than enough of hate, violence, and oppression. John F. Kennedy, it was the words that I needed to hear, and it was a speech that we wanted to weave together to also personify this very complex idea that we are not changing fast enough. We are not putting forward the change that we need, and we are putting our lives and our hopes in the hands of other people, when we need to be the voice of change ourselves, and we need to unify and meet at the center of human experience and have the conversations that we need to have, and break down those barriers. And that was found within those speeches, because every single one of those speeches had the same end, which is hope, unity, a unified people. And that was really important to also explore. And that's kind of how we tackled each of these speeches and dissected them and brought them together to make one cohesive voice.
Although your piece, Christopher, speaks so much about division, and definitely, we talked about this sort of cyclical nature. Yeah, do you feel hopeful about the United States?
I am, we were talking a little bit before this, my family came to this country looking for an opportunity for their daughter to survive, to live. You know, my sister who was dying, and thank God she's okay now. And you know, we
Yeah.
came to this country and it was rich with opportunity. And I mean, it saved her life. You know, my mother, you know, learned English watching Sesame Street, you know, while she raised us and was spending her times in the hospital. You know, this country is built with so much possibility, but it's also built with a lot of hatred and a lack of understanding of those that are different from us. And I think that I do have hope, because I think hope is very much in all of us, but the hope has to come from us willing to engage with others and be patient, be empathetic and compassionate. You know, so many people just want to shut people out of their life because they don't think the same way that they do, but that is not the way forward. The way forward is to have open dialogues. The way forward is to meet at the table with love and understanding. And you know, it takes time. I think that, and I'll just give a small example. You know, when I came out to my father, you know, I was disowned for a time because, you know, my father grew up in a, you know, Latino culture that demonized homosexuality, that,
Yeah.
you know, he was raised to believe that, you know, all these other things. But I spent time and we spent time, and I was able to, in just a short while, change his mind. He accepts me, he loves my husband as if he was his own son. You know, that's the kind of change. I was fortunate, of course, that is not always the case for everyone, but it's about putting in the effort and the work, and it's laborious and it's stressful, but you can change somebody's years and years of thinking in one way and meet them with compassion and meet them and teach them new ways. And we have so much to learn from the other generation as well. And so to me, I do have hope. I think it is hope that takes a lot of work
Yeah.
to get to where we need to go. So
Um, your two dancers, Marin Hassler and Anthony Velasquez, you obviously had a choreographer. Did you guys plan everything in advance, or as you were shooting, you started discovering things with movement?
you know, we storyboarded the whole piece and we knew where we were going. But while we were there, you know, working with Ellen Kim, who is an incredible choreographer, being able to work through the pieces and try different things and experiment with different forms of capturing, you know, feeling pulled against, not able to engage, not able to touch, you know, when we're engaging in a conversation, or we're entering a discourse, there's so much of this intensity where we're not seeing each other's point of view. We're not allowing ourselves to touch the other person, and being able to capture that type of movement and explore different ways of engaging, not only physically, but the movement of actual dance meeting, you know, just these different forms of movement, you know, it was all kind of magically happening there, experimenting on stage and on set.
Mm-hmm.
But also we brought a few things ahead of time. So it was a mix and match of really feeling it out, because at times we, you know, when you know, there's that unity moment at the end. That was something that we found as we were filming it, and I was speaking the direction as they were exploring their bodies and mirroring each other. You know, it was a beautiful experience that we were all feeling in the moment, and a very collaborative art form. So
And was the lighting and the set, because I mean, one of the powerful visual things about the film is that the lighting switches, and so their skin looks, you know, black, then it looks white,
mhm.
and the background also, almost like a negative, keeps shifting. Is that something that was happening live and you were recording, or it was post-production that?
So Don Menon, who's a master cinematographer, we sat down and, you know, he rigged the lights, you know, all across the ceiling, and they were rigged in such a way that I had access to the light board. So as the dancing and the movement was happening, I was able to simultaneously choreograph the lighting at the same time. So everything was live. The lighting shifts and everything was happening as it was happening on stage. And we made sure that those dynamic movements and lighting cues were in sync at exactly the same time where we needed them to come in with the movement, with the dancers. It was, you know, you couldn't tell from the final piece, but it's a lot of calling out, and, you know, it was a cacophony of collaboration that was happening all simultaneously, but it was all live. So
And you mentioned already that you storyboarded the whole piece.
mhm.
You also edited the film. What was there new discoveries when you were editing the film, or it was pretty close to what you had storyboarded?
Oh, it definitely evolved over time. I think the hardest part was that it was so long originally, because originally the speech, we had so many of these beautiful words and ideas that we wanted to convey from the speeches of the past, but it was just too long, and so we condensed it down into a much more sharp and visceral experience and conveyed the most essential ideas. And I think that's where the punch comes in, as opposed to being this slow exploration of how we're divided, really ramping it up to just this emotional force. And it almost makes you feel a little attacked, which was kind of the intention on the front end in the first half. It's supposed to make you feel like you're experiencing this almost violence against yourself. So it did evolve slowly.
I mean, I find it very powerful and moving. I mean, my experience watching the film is that I was being engaged emotionally, intellectually, and ideological. And then after several watches, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, the political, the ideological, the emotional, all those levels are being addressed in your film, and that was your intention, correct?
Correct. Yeah, very much so. And just because there were so many layers to what we were trying to explore, and the only way that we knew that we could explore it instead of being in a completely narrative space was an experimental one. And being able to layer every single aspect, from the physical embodiment of violence and oppression and division to the verbal kind of understanding of the past mixed with the present, and how that message holds true. I mean, all of that was necessary in this one, I would call it artistic gush exploration of those topics. And it was necessary to have every single one. But yes, 1000% the intention of what we were trying to do from the very beginning.
And it's stunningly beautiful black and white stark photography. Was that always your intention, that it needed to be black and white?
Well, it's a huge influence of mine is Sebastião Salgado, who is an incredible, Brazilian photographer and journalist. And, I think it's the binary, it's how we see the world. I think, people, we think we see in this exorbitant color, but really a lot of us live in this black and white world where we are so true to our own belief systems and live in our own perspective and lens of the world. But the truth is that the unity is in the gray. And that's really where we find ourselves at the end. And I think there was no other way to explore the binary of division except through black and white.
Wow. I do have to ask you one, the flags at the end. What did you want us to get out of the flags at the end?
So, I think a big part of the issue that I have with just being alive today is there's a lot of individualism. It's the idea that we wave our own banners, our own flags, and each of them has their own flag that they're waving. But at the end, in the final moment, when they kind of lift those flags at the same time, it actually forms the equality symbol for the briefest of moments. It's the individuals forming the whole, and that was it's a very subtle end. And if you you see it or you don't, but it's one of those things where we wanted to convey it is impossible to do alone. The only way to move forward is together. And their flags becoming that one iconic symbol at the
end. And so the film was here in Santa Barbara, and it won the top award for shorts. Congratulations. Well,
Thank you.
How did you feel when you were chosen by the jury?
I was incredibly emotional. I was honored. I love Santa Barbara. I've gone to the film festival so many times. And to actually have, I mean, it's one of the most amazing and enjoyable film festivals experiences that I've had. But no, it was an honor. It was an incredible honor. And I was.
And tell the audience the journey of where the short has been shown. And
So it won Best in Photography and Award of Excellence at the One Reeler Short Film Competition. It was in St. Louis International, Flickers, Rhode Island. And right now it has a very long festival cycle coming up because so many festivals are coming up. So we're very excited for the next year, leading up to Oscar season, where we will definitely be putting out an Oscar campaign and pushing forward the film as much as we can so more people get a chance to see it.
That's terrific. Now, are you going to be able to attend some of these festivals in person now that things are opening up?
I'm praying. I think any opportunity that I get, I will go there. The world is in such a drastic, ever-changing flow that I'm hoping that these film festivals can be in person. Especially, and so
yeah.
We'll see.
Which actually, there was one question that I was going to bring up, is the fact that you shot the film before the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the editing and getting it finalized was done after the pandemic. Can you
Yes.
tell us about the process?
Oh man, the pandemic is it's been a curse. It's been an absolute, horror. I've lost so many people that I've cared about and loved, and as have so many people that I know as well who have as well. But it also was kind of, in its own minor way, the smallest of silver linings was a blessing, because it gave us time to focus in on our voices and our work and say, ensure that we're using our time wisely to push forward a conversation about how we can better ourselves as people. And the pandemic gave us the opportunity to be locked away in a room. There was nowhere to go. It was the only thing you could focus on was the message and the art. And finishing it during the pandemic, everything was remote. Sending it to our sound designer, recording separately. It was just, the challenges of doing production now were only amplified, but it also kind of strengthened our resolve to make sure that it was the best product we could make during the time.
And do you find, Christopher, do you feel as an artist of Latino heritage and also LGBTQ, do you find that more voices are going to be heard from now on? Do you feel hopeful in that regard?
I do. I really do. You know, I think as we champion diversity, and it's more so than just ethnic diversity, it's also diversity of thought, and I think it's really important that the more voices that we can get out there from, people of color, from indigenous communities, from female directors, it is so important for us to lift up those voices, underrepresented voices, so that they have an opportunity to speak. And I think that there is a trend that's coming, and there's a trend and I think it's important, because some people see it as, oh, it's just the popular thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. It's the only way that we can meet at the center of experience, and have these conversations and grow as people, is to see the different cultural backgrounds that we have and express the cultural melting pot that is America. And so, yes, I'm very hopeful that we will have more opportunities for underrepresented voices to speak out, and incredibly, not just, because the queer experience isn't a monolith, the Latinx experience is not a monolith, the Black experience is not a monolith, but that's individual diversity coming together and exploring stories within those communities as well. I think is I pray is what's going to happen over the next few years, more and more, until it is just commonplace.
Well, Christopher, I can't wait to see what you do next. What's the project that you're working on now?
Well, we have so I have a slate of diverse projects that we're doing, from romantic comedies to horror movies. But the one as a writer director that I'm focusing on more is a film called Casa Quemada, and it's based, inspired on a true story of a trans woman named Juana Maita, who was murdered in Bolivia by a mob of 400 in broad daylight. And it's an exploration of the different people that were there that day and her story and her life. And so that's what I've been, working towards as my first feature, to be able to capture the nuances of the indigenous community, the child laborers in Bolivia, and the trans community, who I'm working closely with now.
Right. Well, we'll definitely keep rooting for you over here in Santa Barbara. You're home. You're away from home in Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah. Wish you all the best. Please keep in touch about about what's happening in the next few months. And
I
thank
promise.
you. And thank you for doing this conversation with us. I really
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for having
Christopher.
me.
Absolutely. Thank you.